Hello friends, welcome to the HFY Ode, where we bring you new science fiction stories, a new world, a new adventure. And yes, there is no robotic or AI voices here, only real human voices with real human touch. So let's start this journey, and please subscribe my channel if you like the stories and press the bell icon for the latest updates. Let's have a story. Okay.
My name is Tel Ravan. I was a sergeant in the Coalition Border Watch for 11 cycles. I have seen things most soldiers never see. And I am telling you this story because I need someone to know what really happened on Station Karomir, the day the human came aboard. Not the official version, the real one. I'll start at the beginning, the quiet part, because the quiet part is the part nobody believes was quiet. It was a slow rotation that day. The kind where you count the lights on the docking ring just to give your eyes something to do. Karomir was a transit station. Old bones, older wiring. It hung at the edge of the Velen Reach like a tooth that nobody wanted to pull. Ships came through to refuel, to trade, to disappear. We watched them. That was the whole job. Watch, log, wave them on. I remember the hum. Stations always hum. You stop hearing it after a while, the way you stop hearing your own breathing. But that morning the hum felt thinner, stretched. I told myself it was the cold cycle. The heaters always groaned when the station turned its face away from the Reach's twin suns. My partner that rotation was a young soldier named Dalm. He was a brasque, big, gray, 4 arms, the kind of body that made tourists step aside in the corridors. He looked terrifying. He was not. He hummed little songs to himself when he thought I wasn't listening. He fed the dock vermin scraps from his ration tin. Soft, that one. I liked him. You hear that? Dalm asked. Hear what? The hum, it's off. I looked at him, so he'd noticed too. Cold cycle, I said. He nodded, but he kept glancing at the ceiling, like the station might answer him. I should have listened to that feeling, the one in my gut, the old soldier's whisper that says something is wrong and you don't know what yet. I had ignored that whisper 100 times and been right too. Stations are full of small wrong things, a flickering light, a late shipment, a door that sticks. This was not a small wrong thing. The ship came in at the 18th hour. It was small, battered, the kind of hull you see on freelancers and salvagers, patched in 3 different metals, scorched along one flank like it had kissed something hot and lived. No coalition markings, no registry beacon, just a ship coming in slow, asking for a berth. Dalm pulled the request up on his panel. Single occupant, he read. Origin, unlisted species. He stopped. Species what? Doesn't say, the field's blank. I leaned over. He was right. Blank. That wasn't unusual on its own. Half the freelancers in the Reach lied on their forms or left them empty out of habit. But blank made my supervisor twitchy. And my supervisor that rotation was a Dreven officer named Castellan Oru, who was twitchy on a good day. I sighed, tell him. He's going to make us go down. I know, tell him anyway. Don told him, Oru made us go down. We met the ship at berth 9. Lower ring, the cheap berths, the ones that smelled like coolant and old smoke. Oru came with us, which surprised me. Castellans didn't usually leave their warm offices for a single freelancer. Blank species field, Oru said by way of explaining himself. His voice came out flat through his breathing rig. Dreven couldn't handle station air without filters. Could be a smuggler, could be a fugitive. We process it by the book. By the book, I agreed. By the book meant 4 guards, weapons holstered but present, scanners up, and a polite request for the occupant to step out slowly with hands visible. Standard. I'd done it 1,000 times. My hands knew the routine better than my head did. The berth clamps locked. The ship hissed and settled, venting heat that fogged the cold air. We waited. The hatch was an old manual type, a wheel and a seal, and we heard it turning from inside. Slow, patient. I want you to understand something. At that moment I was calm, genuinely calm. I had stood in that exact spot facing things that could have torn the four of us apart: a rogue Hask warrior, a panicked Illith with a cutting torch, a smuggler's cargo that turned out to be live and hungry. I'd survived all of it by staying calm, by being the steady one, by being the rock the panic broke against. Stay calm, I told myself, the way I always did, a habit, a prayer. The hatch opened, and out stepped a human. Now I need to back up, because if you're listening to this and you don't know what a human is, then you're lucky, and I envy you, and I'll try to explain. In those days, humans were a rumor, a story soldiers told in the barracks to scare the new recruits. You hear about the Deathworlders, the pack hunters from the gravity well. Most of us had never seen one. The coalition kept its distance from their system. There were treaties, quiet ones, the kind nobody talked about because talking about them meant admitting why they existed. What we knew was this: humans came from a world that should have killed them. Heavy gravity, lethal predators, a star that burned their skin, whether that could freeze them solid or boil them alive depending on which part of the planet they were standing on. And they had not just survived it, they had won it, tamed it, built cities on the bones of the things that hunted them. And then, this was the part that made the old soldiers go quiet: they had looked up at the killing stars and decided to go there too. We knew they were endurance creatures, that they could run prey to death over days, that they bled and kept fighting, that their medicine was crude and their bodies healed anyway, that you could not reliably scare one because fear to a human was apparently just information. We knew all of that, and still, knowing a thing and seeing it are different animals. I saw it. The human was small. That was my first thought, and I want to be honest about it because it shames me now. She was smaller than me, smaller than Dawn by half. A soft-looking thing in a worn jacket, with that strange flat face humans have, two forward eyes, a mess of dark hair tied back. She moved a little stiff, like she'd been sitting too long. She had her hands up, palms out, exactly like we'd asked. And I thought, oh, the stories were exaggerated. I have never been so wrong about anything in my life. Easy, the human said. Her translator clicked it into trade standard a half beat after her mouth moved. Her voice was low and even. I'm not armed. I'm just here to refuel and go. Oru stepped forward. Identify your species for the record. The human looked at him, just looked. And there was something in that look, not aggression, nothing so loud. It was the look of someone reading a room, counting exits, measuring four armed strangers and deciding calmly, in about a second and a half, exactly how this would go if it went wrong. I knew that look. I'd worn it myself. I just had never been on the receiving end of it. Human, she said. The word dropped into the berth like a stone into still water. I felt Dawn go rigid beside me. I felt my own hand drift just slightly toward my sidearm, not a decision, a reflex, the body knowing before the mind. Oru's filters hissed faster. Even the fourth guard, a steady old Rauk named Petrov who I'd never once seen flinch, took half a step back. And the human noticed all of it. Yeah, she said quietly, I get that a lot. Here's the thing nobody tells you about fear. I'd built my whole career on being the calm one, the steady one. I genuinely believed, standing there, that I understood courage, that I knew what it was to be the unmoved thing in a moving world. But watching that human stand in a cold berth, surrounded by four armed soldiers from species that outweighed her, outnumbered her, and had every reason to be nervous around her, watching her stay loose. Watching her keep her breathing slow when she had to know exactly what we were and exactly how this could end. I realized I didn't understand calm at all. I understood control. I controlled my fear. I leashed it every rotation with discipline and routine and the little prayer I told myself. Stay calm. It worked. It had always worked. But the human wasn't controlling fear. There was nothing to control. She just wasn't afraid, not of us. We were the threat in the room, and she'd already done the math, and the math said she'd be fine, and so she was. It's a small difference. It is the largest difference in the universe. Refuel and go, Oru repeated. That's all you want. That's all, the human said. I've got credits, clean ones. I'll pay the docking fee, top off the cells, and you'll never see me again. I promise you, officer, I want nothing here but to leave. It was a reasonable thing to say. It was, in fact, exactly what I would have wanted in her place. A quiet transaction, a quiet exit. And it might have gone that way. It would have gone that way. If the station had not, at that exact moment, started to die. The first sign was the lights. They didn't flicker. They dimmed all at once, the whole berth dropping into a sick orange half-dark, the emergency tone of a system shedding power it couldn't spare. The hum I'd been not hearing all rotation changed pitch, dropped, became a groan, became the sound a big old machine makes when something deep inside it finally lets go. Dawn's panel screamed. "Reactor," he shouted, 4 hands flying over the controls. "Sergeant, it's the reactor, the containments," he stopped. His big gray face went pale at the edges. "That's not a fault. That's not a fault. That's a breach." Oru spun toward him. "Explain now." "Coolant loop's gone, just gone like somebody cut it. The core's heating. If it goes critical." "How long?" I said. My voice came out steady. "Old habit, good habit." "I don't," Dawn swallowed. "Minutes, maybe. The auto vent should have triggered and it didn't. It's like the safeties are." His eyes went wide. "They're locked out. Somebody locked out the safeties." The berth went very quiet under the groaning of the dying station. Somebody locked out the safeties. That doesn't happen by accident. A coolant loop doesn't cut itself, and a safety system doesn't lock itself out. Someone had done this. Someone aboard Caromir had reached into the heart of the station and pulled the pins deliberately, and was even now letting it burn. And the only stranger aboard, the only unlisted, blank species, unregistered freelancer who had docked not 20 minutes before the reactor began to fail, was standing right in front of us. Oru's weapon came up. So did Petrov's. So, I am ashamed to say, did mine. 3 barrels on the human in the orange dark. "You," Oru said, "what did you do?" And here is the moment I'll remember until I die. The human did not raise her hands again. She did not flinch. She did not protest or beg or do any of the dozen things a guilty creature does when 3 weapons find it. She listened. Her head tilted, just slightly, toward the groaning bulkhead, toward the sound. And I watched her face change, not into fear, but into something I'd later understand was recognition. The look of someone who has heard a machine make exactly that sound before and lived, and learned what it means. "That's not me," she said, quiet, certain. "And we don't have time for you to figure that out. So I'm going to tell you what's actually happening, and you're going to decide really fast whether to shoot me or follow me, and I'd suggest follow. You expect us to. I expect you to hear that." She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. That pitch, that's a thermal runaway. I've heard it twice. The first time I lost 3 friends because we stood around arguing about whose fault it was. So shoot me or don't, officer, but the Corps doesn't care about your investigation. And in about 4 minutes it's going to vent its opinion into this station and everyone on it. Nobody moved. The station groaned again, lower, worse. "Sergeant," Dawn said, very small, the numbers match what she's saying." Oru's filters hissed. I could see him fighting it, the procedure, the suspicion, the thing every officer is built to do, which is to not trust the stranger who appeared right before the disaster. It's good instinct. It's usually correct. It was about to get everyone on Caromir killed. I made a choice. I don't fully know why. Maybe it was that look on her face. Maybe it was 11 cycles of trusting my gut. Maybe it was just that of all the faces in that berth, hers was the only one that wasn't panicking. "Castellan," I said, "we don't have time. If she's lying, we lose nothing. The Corps kills us either way. If she's telling the truth, she's the only one here who's seen this before. Oru stared at me, then at the human, then at the dying lights. "Lower your weapon, Sergeant Vun," he said, to me, not to her. I didn't, not all the way. I lowered it halfway, which is the most honest thing I did that whole day. The human noticed. Of course she did. She noticed everything. And she almost smiled. "Smart," she said. "Keep it there. I'd trust me less than that. Now who knows this station's guts? Real answer, not who's supposed to." Dawn raised one of his 4 hands, slow, like a recruit in a classroom. "Good," the human said. "You're with me, the rest of you." Her eyes swept us fast, sorting. "I need bodies that don't panic and don't freeze. 2 minutes ago I'd have said none of you qualified." She looked at me when she said it, right at me. "But you didn't shoot, so maybe." And she turned and walked into the dying station like she owned it. We followed her. I still don't know if that was the bravest thing I ever did or the most foolish. Both, probably. They're closer than people think. The corridors of Caromir were a nightmare in that orange light. The station was waking up to its own death. Alarms I'd never heard layered over each other. Pressure doors slamming on automatic cycles. Somewhere far off, a crowd roar, the civilians on the upper rings finding out, all at once, that the floor under them was a bomb. The human moved through it like water finds a crack. Fast but not frantic. She'd glance at a junction, read the signage in a language she couldn't possibly know, and pick a direction off the flow of the cabling in the open panels. She read machines the way I read faces. "How do you know where to go?" I demanded, half running beside her. My legs were longer. I still struggled to keep up. "I don't," she said. "I know where the core is. The core's the same on every station, center mass, deepest shielding, follow the coolant runs backward. The rest I'm guessing." "You're guessing." "Educated, there's a difference." She vaulted a fallen conduit without breaking stride. "You want certainty, soldier. There's no certainty in here. There's just moving, and not moving's going to kill us. So we move." Dawn, lumbering behind us with his 4 arms and his panel, called out, "Pressure door ahead, sealing, it's on auto cycle. We won't make it." I looked, he was right. Ahead of us a great slab of a door was grinding down out of the ceiling, and we were too far and it was too fast. The human didn't slow. She sped up. I want to describe this exactly, because nobody believes me when I tell it. The door was coming down. A creature with any sense slows, stops, finds another way. The human ran harder, low and flat, that death-rolled her body doing the one thing it was built across a million years of a killing planet to do, and she hit the gap, and she rolled, and she came up on the far side and turned and jammed her whole body into the closing edge of a pressure door that could have cut her in half. It should have crushed her. It did not. It stopped. It stopped because she had wedged a fallen length of conduit, snatched off the floor mid-roll. I never even saw her grab it into the door's track, and the door ground against it, screaming, and held. "G.O.," she shouted, both hands on the conduit, every muscle in that small body straining, her flat face gone red with the effort. "It won't hold long, G.O." We went. Dawn first, then Petrov, then Oru, scrambling under the screaming door while she held it with a bent pipe in her own bones. I went last. As I ducked under, my eyes met hers, 6 inches away, and I saw the strain in them and the focus, and the complete and total absence of fear. "Stay calm," she said to me, through gritted teeth, holding a 1,000-kilo door off our necks with a stick. "You're doing fine." She said it to me, the steady one, the rock, as if I were the one who needed steadying. And the worst part, the part that rearranged something in my chest that has never gone back, is that she was right. I did need it, and it worked. We made it through. She yanked the conduit free and rolled clear, and the door slammed shut behind her with a sound like the end of the world. She lay on the floor for 1 second, just one, breathing hard. Then she got up. "Okay," she said like nothing had happened. "Which way's the core?" We found out who killed the station about 90 seconds later. Not from a clue, from a person. He was waiting for us in the antechamber outside the reactor core, a Dreven, like Oru, but young and wild around the eyes in the gray coveralls of station maintenance. He had a cutting tool in one hand and a deadman's trigger in the other, and behind him the great sealed door of the core glowed a sick deepening orange through its viewport. "Stay back," he screamed. His translator barely kept up. "Stay back or I'll." "Saboteur," Oru breathed. "Maintenance," he had the access. The human stopped, held up a hand to stop the rest of us, and she looked at the trembling Dreven the way she'd looked at us in the berth, reading, counting, measuring. "You did this," she said, not a question, gentle almost. "You cut the loop, locked the safeties. Why?" "They were going to the coalition." He was shaking so hard the deadman's trigger rattled. "They decommissioned us, the whole station, reassigned. My family, they said redundant. They used that word about us, like we're nothing, like Caromir is nothing, so I thought if it burns, if at all, then they'll know we were." "Real," the human finished softly. "You wanted them to know you were real." He stared at her, the trigger rattled. And I braced, because I knew what came next. I'd seen it in a dozen standoffs. The negotiator stalls, the soldier's flank, you take the threat down hard and fast before the deadman drops. That's the procedure. That's what works. I shifted my weight to move. The human caught my eye and shook her head. "No." Then she did the most insane thing I have ever watched a living creature do. She walked toward him, hands open, slow, right toward the shaking saboteur with the deadman's trigger that, if he let go, would dump the last of the containment and end us all in fire. "Don't," Oru hissed. "I see you," the human said to the Dreven, still walking. Calm, so calm. "I do. You're not nothing. You're a person whose home is being taken and nobody listened, and you found the one button that makes them listen. I get it. I really do. Stay back. I'm not going to take it from you." She stopped, just out of his reach, close enough that if he dropped the trigger she'd burn first. "I couldn't if I wanted to. You've already won, you made them notice. The whole coalition's going to know the name Caromir now. You did that. It worked." The Dreven's eyes filled. "But here's the thing nobody's told you," she said, even softer, "because they were all too busy being afraid of you to talk to you. If you let go of that trigger, the story they tell isn't they pushed a good man too far. The story is a maintenance worker murdered 400 people. That's the name you get. That's what your family gets. Forever." He was crying now. The trigger rattled and rattled. "You don't want to be a monster," the human said. "You want to be heard. Those are different doors, and one of them's still open. I'll walk through it with you. I swear to you, I will stand next to you and make them listen with my own mouth in front of whoever you want. But you have to hand me the trigger, slow. And then we fix your station instead of burning it, and you tell your story alive." Silence, the core glowed, the station groaned. And the saboteur, the man who had decided to kill us all, looked into the face of a creature his whole galaxy was raised to fear, and saw, in that face, the only one in the room who had walked toward him instead of away. He handed her the trigger. His hand was shaking so badly she had to close her own fingers around his to steady it. Slow, careful, like diffusing a bomb made of a person. "There," she breathed. "They're good, I've got it, you're okay. Stay calm, you're doing fine." The same words she'd said to me under the door. I understood then that they weren't a tactic. They were just true. They were the truest thing she knew, and she gave them away to anyone who needed them, friend or enemy, soldier or saboteur, like they cost nothing. They cost everything. That's why they worked. That should have been the end of the danger. The saboteur disarmed, the trigger secured. It wasn't. Because the station was still dying. The trigger was a threat, but the breach he'd already made was a fact, and facts don't surrender. Dawn's panel was a wall of red. "The deadman's safe, but the core doesn't care," he said, voice cracking. "Coolant's gone, safety's locked, it's still climbing. We've got," he checked, and I watched the number break something in him, 2 minutes, maybe less. Disarming him didn't stop it. Nothing stops it now except someone goes in there and vents it manually, the human said. Dawn looked at her. Yeah, he whispered. But the chamber's already past safe exposure. Anyone who goes in to pull the manual vent, he stopped. Doesn't come back out, the human finished. I know, I told you. I've heard this sound twice. And she handed me the deadman's trigger. Pressed it into my hand. Closed my fingers around it the same gentle way she'd closed the saboteurs around it a moment before. Hold that, she said. Don't drop it, you're the steady one. I clocked that the second I saw you. A breath. Get these people to the rings, get the saboteur somewhere they'll have to hear him. You promised, no, I promised, so you keep it for me, make them listen to him. What are you? But I knew. Of course I knew. She was already at the core door, hand on the manual release. You can't, I said. The words came out strange. I don't beg. I had never once begged in 11 cycles. Tell Ravun doesn't beg. I'd have told you the day before I begged. You can't go in there, you'll die. She paused, looked back at me, and for the first time since the birth, something crossed her face that wasn't pure calm. Something tired. Something old behind those two forward eyes, something that had heard this sound twice and lost friends both times and carried it ever since. Somebody has to, she said simply. It's a Deathworld thing. You'll understand someday, maybe. Where I'm from, the planet's always trying to kill you. So you grow up knowing it's coming for everybody, sooner or later, and the only thing that's ever mattered, the only thing, is what you spend the time in between doing. She almost smiled. I'd rather spend mine like this than die old wondering if I would've. You don't even know us, I said. You came here to refuel and leave. Yeah, she said, I did. She put her hand on the release. Stay calm, she told me one last time. And the human opened the core. The core door sealed behind her with a sound I still hear. It wasn't loud. That's the part that haunts me. You'd think a door that closes on someone's life would slam, would scream, would announce itself. It didn't. It just sighed shut, soft and final, the way a thing closes when it's done deciding. And then there was a viewport. A small one, fogged at the edges, glowing that sick, deepening orange. And through it I could see her. A small shape in a worn jacket, walking into a room that was already killing her. I had the deadman's trigger in one hand. The saboteur, the young Drevin Sevek, I'd learned his name was Sevek, stood beside me with his wrists loose at his sides, no fight left in him, staring at the viewport like the rest of us. Dawn, Petrov, Oro, the whole grim little group she dragged through the dying station, all of us frozen, watching the human do the thing none of us had been built to do. Sergeant, Dawn's voice was very small. We have to move. The vent, when it opens, the radiation, it'll wash back into this corridor. We can't be here. I knew that. I knew it the way you know a thing and refuse it at the same time. Sergeant Vun, Oru this time, quiet for him. She gave you an order, the last one she's going to give, don't waste it. He was right. They were both right. And I have followed 1,000 orders in my life, good ones and stupid ones, and I have never once hated obeying as much as I hated it then. I looked at the viewport one more time. She'd reached the manual vent assembly, a great wheel like the hatch on her ship, because old stations and old ships are built by the same tired hands. She put both her hands on it, and she looked back just once through the fog and the orange, and I swear, across that whole dying chamber she found me, found my eyes through the glass. She didn't wave. She didn't mouth anything dramatic. Humans, I've since learned, don't do much for an audience. She just nodded, once go. I went. I won't pretend I remember the evacuation clearly. It comes back to me in pieces. I remember Sevek's wrist in my grip, dragging him when his legs gave out, because the human had made me promise, and I was not going to let the man she saved fall down and die in a corridor. I remember Dawn's 4 arms scooping up a Illith child who'd been separated from her cluster, the kid screaming, Dawn humming one of his little songs right into the noise of it, low and steady, until she stopped. I remember Petrov putting his old Ralk's shoulder into a jammed pressure door and bending the frame with nothing but his back and his refusal. I remember the rings, the civilians, hundreds of them packed toward the lifeboat berths, that crowd roar I'd heard from far off now all around me, a living wall of panic. And I remember thinking with a strange flat clarity, she's buying this. Every second I'm pushing through this crowd, she's still in there, holding the vent open with her hands, paying for it with her body, so that these people get to be afraid in the lifeboats instead of dead in the dark. That thought is the only thing that got me through. I borrowed her calm. I didn't have my own anymore. Mine had cracked the moment that door side shut, so I used hers, the way she'd handed it to me under the closing door, the way she'd pressed it into Sevek's shaking hands. "Stay calm. You're doing fine." I said it out loud to the crowd, to the kid, to Sevek, to myself. "Stay calm. You're doing fine this way. Stay calm." It worked. It always worked. I finally understood why. It worked because someone had to mean it, and she taught me how. We made the lifeboats. I want to tell you the number because it matters. 411. 411 living souls came off Karomir that day. Brask and Ilith and Ralk and Drevin and 3 species I couldn't even name, packed into boats meant for fewer, breathing too thin air but breathing. 411. And one stayed behind. The vent opened while we were in the boats, pulling away. You could see it from the viewports. The station, old, ugly, beloved Karomir, bled a long plume of superheated gas out into the dark, a controlled scream instead of a final one. The core didn't go critical. It vented. It cooled. It lived in the way machines live because someone inside it had turned a wheel with their own 2 hands and held it against everything the dying thing wanted to do. The station was saved. I stood at the viewport of Lifeboat 3 with the Deadman's trigger still in my fist. I hadn't put it down, couldn't. My fingers wouldn't open, and I watched Karomir stop dying, and I felt no relief at all. Only the small, terrible arithmetic of it. 411. 1. Here is the part where I'm supposed to tell you she died. That's how these stories go. The brave outsider walks into the fire so the rest can live, and the fire takes them, and we name a corridor after them and tell recruits the tale and feel sad and inspired in the safe way you feel things about people who can't hear you anymore. I believe she was dead. We all did. The exposure in that chamber was past lethal before she even walked in. She knew it. She told us. Doesn't come back out. She'd said it plain in the antechamber with no drama at all. So when the station's automated systems flagged a life sign in the core chamber, 11 hours later, I assumed it was an error. A ghost in the old wiring. Karomir was full of those. It was not an error. They found her behind the vent assembly, wedged into a maintenance crawlspace lined with the heaviest shielding on the station. She'd turned the wheel, opened the vent, and then, instead of lying down to die like the story wanted, she'd done the most stubbornly human thing imaginable. She'd looked for a way to live. She'd seen the shielded crawlspace on her way in, clocked it the way she clocked everything, exits, angles, odds. And the moment the vent was holding open on its own mechanical latch, she'd thrown herself into that shielded gap and pulled a lead-lined panel over the opening and curled up small behind it and waited out the worst of it. Not because she thought it would work. She told me later she gave it maybe 1 chance in 5. But where she's from, she said, you don't get to choose between dying brave and dying scared. You only get to choose between lying down and not lying down. And humans, as a rule, do not lie down. She was burned, badly. The exposure had hurt her in ways their crude, stubborn medicine would spend a long time undoing. She'd be a while healing. But humans heal anyway. That's the thing the old soldiers always said in the barracks, like a ghost story. They bleed and keep fighting. Their medicine is crude and they heal anyway. I'd thought it was a story. It was just a fact wearing a story's clothes. When they pulled her out and her two forward eyes cracked open and found me, because of course I was there, I'd refused to leave the recovery dock. I'd stood that whole 11 hours with a trigger I wouldn't put down. The first thing she did was look at my fist. "You're still holding that," she rasped. Her translator was half melted. The words came through anyway. "Told you not to drop it." I opened my hand. The trigger fell. I'd been gripping it so long my fingers had locked, and they ached when they finally let go, and I didn't care. "You came back," I said. "It was all I had." "Yeah," she tried to smile. "It mostly worked. Surprised me, too." Sevek stood trial. "I'm not going to lie to you and tell you it was simple, or that everyone forgave him, because the truth is messier and the truth is what I promised you. He had locked the safeties. He had cut the loop. 411 people had nearly died because a frightened man decided that being heard was worth the risk of being a murderer. Some of those 411 wanted him spaced. I understood them. There were rotations, I half agreed. But the human kept her promise. She was still in a recovery cradle, half her body wrapped, when she made them bring her to the inquiry. Made them. They told her no, she was too weak, and she looked at them with those tired old eyes and said something I didn't hear, and they brought her anyway. People did that around her. Found themselves doing the thing she'd quietly decided would happen. And in front of the coalition tribunal, in front of officers who'd already written redundant and decommissioned and reassigned about Karomir without ever once flying out to say it to the faces it gutted, the human told Sevek's story. With her own mouth, like she'd sworn. She didn't excuse him, she was clear about that. He did a terrible thing, she said. People could have died, people almost did. But then she said the part that mattered. She said, "You built a station and filled it with lives, and then you sent a word redundant to do the work you didn't have the courage to do in person. You decided these people were nothing, and you were surprised when one of them tried to prove he was something. You want to know who broke Karomir? He turned the wheel. But you loaded the gun a long time ago, and you did it from very far away, where you wouldn't have to watch." The room went quiet the way the birth had gone quiet that first day, when she'd said the word human. Sevek didn't walk free. He shouldn't have, but he lived. He was sentenced to labor rebuilding, as it happened, the very station he'd nearly destroyed, which struck me as the only sentence with any sense in it. And the coalition, quietly, in the way it does things it doesn't want to admit it was shamed into, rescinded the decommission. Karomir stayed open. The people who'd been called nothing got to keep being something. The human did that. Not with a weapon, not with a vent wheel, with her mouth and a promise and the simple refusal to let anyone in that room pretend they were the calm ones while she did all the bleeding. I asked her before she left, the question I'd been carrying since the birth. She was loading her ship, refueled at last, free at last to do the thing she'd come to do, which was leave. The battered hull, the 3 metals, the scorch along the flank that I now suspected had a story like this one behind it. "In the birth," I said, "when the reactor went, 3 weapons on you. You'd done nothing wrong, but every instinct any of us had said the stranger did it, and you knew that, and you stood there and you weren't afraid." I shook my head. "I've spent 11 cycles learning to control my fear. I thought that was courage. Then I watched you and you weren't controlling anything. There was just nothing to control. How do you do that?" She thought about it. Humans do that. They actually think before they answer the real questions, instead of reaching for the ready-made thing. It's one of the unsettling ones. "I was scared," she said finally. "You weren't, I watched." "I was terrified, Telra." She used my name. She'd learned it somewhere in the wreck of those days. 3 guns, a reactor, a whole galaxy that's been told stories about how dangerous I am, all standing there afraid of me, which, let me tell you, is its own special kind of lonely. She closed a panel on her ship. "I felt all of it. I just didn't let it pick the next thing I did. That's the whole trick. That's all it ever is. The fear gets a vote. It doesn't get to drive." "That's it. That's it, it's not a death world thing. I lied a little in there when I said it was. It's not in the blood, it's just a habit." She looked at me. "A habit you already have, by the way. I clocked it the second you lowered your weapon halfway instead of all the way. You were terrified too. You did the job anyway, same trick. You just never gave yourself credit for it because you thought courage was supposed to feel like calm. She almost smiled. It never does. The calm's a thing you make on the way down. You make it for other people first, and then there's enough left over for you. You make it for other people first. That's why the words worked. Stay calm, you're doing fine. You don't say them because you feel calm. You say them because someone needs to make the calm out of nothing, and then there's enough. She'd been making it for us the entire time, out of nothing, while terrified. I'd had it backwards my whole life. She left at the 18th hour, same hour she'd arrived, like the universe wanted the symmetry. I went down to berth 9 to see her off. Just me. Dalm wanted to come and I told him no, and he understood, the soft-hearted thing. Some goodbyes are crowds and some are one person. You could stay, I said. I knew she wouldn't, I said it anyway. Coalition could use. The coalition, she said, could use about 1,000 things and most of them aren't me. I've got somewhere to be. She didn't say where. She never did. I think the somewhere was just onward. I think for some humans the destination is always onward, and the worlds they save along the way are just the cost of the road. She paused at her hatch, the old manual wheel. You're going to tell this wrong, you know, she said. When you tell it, they all do. Tell it how? Make me the hero. The brave human walked into the fire, very inspiring the end. She shook her head. Tell it the other way. Tell them I was scared the whole time. Tell them the saboteur was a person and not a monster. Tell them you, the steady sergeant, begged me not to go, and that begging wasn't weakness, it was the most human thing in the room, and you're not even human. She smiled, full and real, the burns pulling at it. Tell them the calm isn't something you have. It's something you make. For each other, on the way down. Why does it matter how I tell it? She thought about that one too. Because somewhere there's a frightened kid, she said, soldier or saboteur or whatever, who's going to hear it. And if you tell them the hero felt no fear, you teach them they can't be the hero because they're scared and they'll always be scared. But if you tell them the truth, she stepped through the hatch, then they'll know. The fear gets a vote. It doesn't get to drive. And maybe on their worst day, they'll turn the wheel. The hatch side shut, soft, final, the same sound as the core. But this time someone was on the other side of it, alive, leaving. I stood in berth 9 and watched the battered little ship release its clamps and drop away into the dark of the Velen Reach, 3 medals and a scorch and a story. And I lifted one hand, the one that had held the trigger, the one that still ached. She didn't wave back. Humans don't do much for an audience. But the running lights flickered once on the way out, off and on, a small thing, a wrong thing in the engineering sense. I choose to believe it was on purpose. So that's the real story of Station Caromir. The quiet part and the loud part, and the part where a small, soft creature from a killing world stood in a cold berth surrounded by guns, and taught a hardened sergeant that everything she knew about courage was inside out. I told it the way she asked, scared the whole time, the saboteur a person, the begging not weakness, the calm a thing you make. I never learned her name. She never offered it and I never asked, and I think that was right. Names are for people you'll see again. What she was a passing thing, a ship in the night that stopped to refuel and ended up holding a dying door open with a bent pipe and a promise. People ask me sometimes what humans are really like. The recruits mostly in the barracks, the way recruits always ask. They want the ghost story, the death worlders, the pack hunters from the gravity well. And I tell them the truth, which is stranger than the ghost story ever was. I tell them, a human is the most frightened thing you will ever meet, and the bravest, and those are the same thing. And you will not understand how until one of them turns to you in the dark, while everything is ending, and says the only words that matter. Stay calm. You're doing fine.